Okay, I think we're ready now, Trina.
All right. Good afternoon, folks. It's actually evening. I keep doing that because the sun is out and it's so beautiful. um, to our Parent Advisory Committee, distribution of donations for staffing meeting for March 29th, 2025. I am calling the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. I've said that. Um, we have um, a few things on the agenda items for today. Oh, first thing I want to do though is make sure that we uh, accept and uh, adopt the meeting minutes from last week. Is there anyone that wants to? Uh, Sorry, I'm tired.
I'll motion to accept them.
Thank you.
I'll
You
second.
are. Thank you. I feel like Satan saves me all the time. I appreciate you.
Who,
um,
who motioned? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. Oh, Sasha. Okay. And then
yeah,
who second?
I seconded.
Isla.
Isla.
Thank
thank
you.
you, Isla.
Do you want me to do a quick review of the slides and then we'll get into this discussion, Trina?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
Okay.
yes. Thank you. Sorry.
Um, so this is the same slide that we've looked at a few times. We may want to come back to it at some point if in terms of our criteria. There was a little bit of confusion about scenario A, so I just wanted to explain that this was a new proposal the team put together replacing the Paloma app with live high impact tutors. There is an attachment, one of the attachments where they describe that a little more fully. And I followed up with that team to find out what this means exactly. So I just wanted to give you a little more context. So for next year, the PPS budget from an early literacy funding from ODE will pay for the high impact tutoring in 26 schools, and having this additional 256,000 would add 8 more schools to the list. The I shared with the team that there was some interest when we went around the room and voted on the different initiatives, that there were some people who thought Ignite made sense because it was one-on-one tutors as opposed to just an app for parents, um, and that there was some support for IXL. So they kept those in there. Those are things that they would like to do to increase the scale of the number of students that are served. The PAC could decide to alter this scenario A to not include those, or it could be a combination of things. So this is not like set in stone, the only version of this high impact tutor scenario. It was the one that I put in the survey so that we could get feedback on it. And I did not tell the team like how much money to propose in their high impact tutoring. That was what they put forth. This is how they would want it to do it. The food pantries, I know that there was some hesitation about that. This is a slightly reduced version. They had asked for 350 or 250. That could be eliminated or reduced. There are some schools that don't have any infrastructure for food pantries right now, so just getting food would not be enough for some of those schools. And the one that I know of for certain is that does not have anything right now is Chapman, which is in Northwest Portland, but there is now family shelters located near the school, and they're now a Title I school. So we have applied for grants. We have not been awarded. That's for consideration. That could be removed as well. And then also the fundraising amount could change or be eliminated. So there could be a piecing together of these, or a vote could, depending on what the discussion is, it could be that the PAC recommends that as much money as possible go to the one-on-one high impact tutoring and leave it to that team to figure out like the composition. What happens, it's not a straight formula where you could just say, oh, because we have this amount, we can just add a certain number of EAs. There needs to be a certain number of teachers, lead teachers and administrators to oversee the program. So that's sort of like the formula that they would have to figure out, based on what we recommend. So that is just a little more explanation of this one. I'm just going to show the other two and then turn it over to you for the discussion. This was the one we talked about where it would probably be 11 schools that would have a full-time EA. It could be split between 2 schools, but that's not the preference of most principals. And this includes a little bit, the 35,000 for some seed funding for future fundraising. And this was the allocation per school formula. Oh, and I was going to share, I'll just end it. I'll just stop there. And I do have some information on the survey if people want to know how that went. One more person joining the meeting, sorry. Trina, would you like me to share the pie charts on the page or take questions or comments first?
So yeah, I think that would be great. And just seeing how everyone voted, I think it's going to help folks see why we're kind of focusing on scenario number 1. And we also want to make sure that you guys know that this, like we said, the scenarios are put together so that we get an outline of what could be done. If there's certain parts you want to adjust or take out, that's something that we could talk about as well. I cannot see the participants because I'm taking the call from my cell phone today. And so if there are questions, I'm gonna have to rely on Robin to kind of take over that for me. But if you want to go over the pie charts just a little bit, Robin, that would be helpful, I think.
Okay.
How many people responded to the survey? How many votes does this reflect?
That's a good question.
7 responses. So I know there was also some confusion about whether that people intended us all to vote on the survey or not. So this is not the final word by any means. It's information. I didn't hear from Audrey though. I did email her a couple times and she probably just was not able to check her email while on vacation, which is understandable. So the Google survey does this handy thing where it gives you pie charts automatically. So the scenario A, the learning acceleration, the high impact tutoring with the formulas received 42.9% was the first choice. However, I do want to offer the caveat about 42.9% listed it as their third choice. So this is not like, a home run by any means. But when you compare it to the scenario B, 28.6 ranked that as their first choice, 42.9 as their second choice. And then scenario C, 14.3, that was their first choice. And 28.6, it was their second choice. So that was all I was going to share on that. Does anyone want to have a discussion, or let me just go back to this one. Dan.
Did you mean a discussion just about the survey or just like starting just generally about this whole choice we're making?
Yes, anything is fine.
I guess I had a quick question about the fundraising piece. I remember in the first slide last meeting, there was something about how PPS was going to provide some kind of fundraising efforts or dollars for this process, but it didn't really say how much or how involved that was. And so I
Yeah.
think that might affect whether or not we would put money towards fundraising.
Yeah, so our department is strategic partnerships. It's budgeted to have this year to have 4 FTE. District offices have not gotten their proposed cuts for next year. I think senior leaders know, but I'm director of strategic partnerships. I don't know if I'll have 4 FTE, which includes myself, or 3, or further reductions. We're also under the Fund for PPS continuing to fundraise, and we're hoping to hire an executive director. It's always been housed under the district, and now that it's moving along 5 years plus, the thinking was it's time for it to have its own leadership, even though if it's still closely aligned with our team, and we do some of the work to support it. So of course there can always be more, but it's not a straight formula that says like, well, if you hire this many, then you'll raise this many. It all has to do with, part of what we're trying to do here is recommend something to the board that we think that the parent community can get behind and help, and that could help us increase fundraising. But having seed money, if we wanted to organize different types of fundraising events, would probably be beneficial, especially if we're also hiring an executive director. Right now, at this point, we don't really have enough to hire an executive director full-time for next year. So it kind of depends on what happens in the next few months. We're on the same calendar year as the district, so we have until June 30 till we know our final fundraising for the year. Does that answer your question, Dan? Sorry, it's sort of rambling.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I guess because some proposals say 135,000 for fund. Oh, I'm sorry, 143,000 for fundraising. Some say 35,000 for fundraising. And so I guess if we knew that there was already going to be some kind of substantial effort from the school district to do fundraising, then maybe we wouldn't have to prioritize it as much. But I guess it's a smaller piece of the overall scenario, but still.
I'll just jump. I think really what the takeaway for me is that we have some staff, and not all of Robin's staff are working on fundraising, but we have some bodies that can do the work. We don't have, as Robin said, if you to raise money, you have to spend money, right? So sometimes you have to throw an event, and there's really not at this point a lot of money to do that. There's some probably that we could use from the fund, but there's not gobs of it.
Well, that's helpful. I mean, so even if we had the humans to do it, we still need some money to throw events or do something with it, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
I think it's Suzanne and then Sun who had their hands up.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment for clarification. I feel like I'm maybe the only person that's really struggling with this, but according to the district-wide advocacy and fundraising policy, a formula for, or we're calling it a method for the distribution of any funding to individual schools is supposed to be developed in advance of the school year by a parent advisory committee and shared with school administrators for feedback and a recommendation made to the board. So I am, my understanding is that means that in addition to recommending the distribution of this 1 million, our PAC is deciding on a method for distribution of funds prior to the fundraising year, so next year, and not the fund allocation school year, which would be the following year after the next school year. And this distinction is important because donors have to be informed about where their dollars are going. So is it correct that in addition to deciding the distribution of this 1 million, we're also recommending the model for the 2025-26 fundraising school year for the distribution of funds for the 26-27 school year? And if that's the case, my decision for how we spend the 1 million would be different from what I would recommend for the model for fundraising for the following year. And I don't think we can do both tonight. So I just want to throw out the possibility of a working group of volunteers that does the latter and comes up with that model for next year.
Well, we have been thinking about this, the timing of decisions and the amount. It's sort of how Trina put it once before, yes, and, so it's sort of like investing this money shows parents where the fundraising will go. If there is new information, like things happen, like at the federal government, the state legislature, if the things change significantly between now and next year at this time, the PAC could make a different decision. What we haven't put together that full administrative directive because we're trying to figure out how this would work best. But one idea is to fundraise on a calendar year. So it would be like January to December, then allocate. So like see what we have to allocate for next year. That way we would have time to be able to show parents this is what we're investing in, and be able to say how it's working and get more feedback as we're fundraising. Then if there is like a big change in what's happening, there could be a different decision, but that it's always going to be in line with the broad umbrella. And we could have set a goal of like this we're able to serve this many schools if we had this much more. Like a goal is always good when you're fundraising. So I do think it would.
So are you saying the 1 million we're out deciding or making a recommendation on is also we're putting forward as the fundraising items for next year? Like we're recommending
Yes.
that this is what folks fundraise for, these same exact items. Okay, I think that's really important for everybody to know going into this decision.
Sun, did you have something to add?
Well, I think Suzanne brings up a great point, actually, about how, right, the recommendations we would make to the board right now for this 1 million, would that be, the same recommendation going forward? But I think, because the numbers will change significantly, because right now we're only dealing with 1 million, which is 33% of what was raised all of last year. Whereas moving forward, if we're looking at 100%, that the recommendation being how we would distribute, essentially 3 or 4 million across the schools. I think it does change what I would vote on within these 3 scenarios. The point I wanted to make, though, was just, I had brought up the endowment idea previously, which, because of just if we were to look at this 143,000, and if we were to put that into an endowment at an increase of 8% annually, and if we contributed another 100,000 annually, by with the compound interest, within like 25 years, we'd have an endowment of 9 million. But if we looked at putting 10% annually and we raise 3 million next year and we put in 300,000, then, after 25 years, we would have an endowment of, almost $23 million that, I think we should consider the long-term goals also. So like if we could consider maybe 10% of fundraising going into an endowment to build that, in 20 years or so, we could have a very significant amount, even though it doesn't help right now. And then if our recommendations were to go forward, moving forward, then I think, I think scenario 3 kind of works best as, right now with the 1 million, we can only allocate, I think it's around $22 per student. But, if next year we raise 3 million, then, essentially it would be $66 per student. So like it could be a higher impact moving forward. And if we were still to put 10% towards the endowment, which I think, in the long-term goal for the stability of PPS, I think would be significant, in the long goal. It wouldn't be significant the first 10 years so much, but around 20 years or so, because of the compound interest, how it just exponentially grows. But I think, Suzanne's point of, how we allocate the money this year, would that affect the way the future funds would be allocated? I think, yeah, would change which scenario I would choose. But then is it that each year there will be different scenarios that a PAC will be voting on potentially or recommending?
Yeah, I just want to comment that we'll be lucky to have $1 million next year at this rate of fundraising. We're starting from scratch because the model changed. And so the purpose of selecting what we're investing in is to demonstrate how this will work, how funds will be allocated. Right now, with the school foundations that were fundraising in previous years, our understanding is that some of them are fundraising and they are planning to support other initiatives that they're allowed, and they're not allowed to add staff capacity. But there is interest in contributing to the district-wide model to be able to add staffing, and high impact tutors is something that many groups have contributed to in the past, including PTAs, and that has been partnerships that have paid for nonprofit partners like Reading Results, which are doing the high impact tutoring model. PPS has partnered with them and they've trained their staff. So I do think having something, what a lot of what the kind of topics now is, we don't know how this is going to work. We don't know where the money is going to go. We're not going to be a part of this until we see what it is. We don't know if this is going to work. We don't, so that's what we're trying to do here. That's why we have set aside this $1 million, so that we can build the excitement, the trust in the community to say, see, this is how the funds are being invested in schools. Many schools fundraise for their student body funds, and that is like they can't use that for staff, but that is like monies that they have that they can support their school. I don't think that adding this percentage of money to schools by splitting it is going to have a huge impact. That was why I shared some of those other formulas that were prepared by other analysts in the community, like showing how you might have a greater impact applying a different formula, a more complicated formula than just the $24 per student. But still, it's not going to be enough for a position. So I just need to share that these are all the things we've been weighing, and yeah. So, Sashin?
So there is a committee next year that is gonna like do the same thing we're doing this year, right? Okay.
Yeah, and
And
half of this committee will still be on that committee
oh,
too.
true,
So we
exactly.
have the
Okay.
continuity. Yeah.
Okay. So when we're setting the funding this year, we're like kind of setting it for the next year or two. It's just that it's like not guaranteed that everything will stay exactly the same, given that they'll have like longer to consider, presumably.
Yeah.
Cool.
Dan and then Suzanne.
So I don't know exactly how we want to do this, whether some people are just going to talk more because we raise our hand, but I guess what my thought on this is sort of piggybacking on what you just said and what I said last week, where I guess my concern is, and I will say I have not done nearly as much fundraising as some of the people on this group chat, right? But it seems to me if we present something like I'm looking at right now on the screen, that I'm afraid that the message could be muddled for people who are trying to donate to staffing, because they can already donate to their school foundations. They can already donate to PPS. They can already donate to all these different things to try to help different people in different ways. But this is really the only one that is a way for them to try to get more teachers and more adults in the school to help kids at school. And so I feel like if we show them this thing, it's like, okay, we've got money for food pantries, which isn't about staffing. We've got money for future fundraising, which maybe we need a little bit because we need to be able to throw these parties to get people's attention. And then we also have something that's like a computer thing and then an online thing. I just feel like it's not going to be as clear a message to advertise to people to actually donate to staffing as if we were really focusing on having more people. So like the things that I see as more people are either the EAs and the other proposal and or these reading support EAs, which they're, I guess, both the concept of having more people in there actually helping people, as opposed to having it be sort of spread out across these things. Because I think that most people at the different schools are sort of looking to us to make this next choice about how staffing is going to be supported because they're losing all this staff because of the budget cuts. So I just feel like, and like the per school thing, none of them are going to care about the like handful of $1,000 that the school gets because it's not going to be enough to hire anyone or do anything with. So I just feel like focusing more on the EAs or high impact tutors or a combination of the both would be more beneficial for getting people to want to donate to staffing than have it be mixed with all these other things that perhaps they could donate in other places or wouldn't think that their staffing donations would be going towards.
Suzanne, I think you were next.
Okay.
I'm wondering if we can vote on whether or not we want to have a decision, two recommendations, one for allocation of these funds, and then a second for a recommendation for next year's PAC, which I don't even, do we know when they would start meeting? Because according to the charter, they don't meet until January. So,
Oh,
which is
that part was just about the current year.
the current.
Yeah, so the quarterly would be what I envisioned is that they would start in
Great.
September and meet, every few months. And then
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we could have a vote on how we do that because, like Sun said, if we do raise 3 million next year, and I don't want to discount that because historically, the old policy didn't invite people who didn't support the old policy to participate. So we really don't know how much money we can raise going forward with this new concept. And I would just, $1 million versus 4 million looks very different. Would we spend $3 million on just high impact tutors? And then secondly, I just want a sense of, I don't know how you fund 16 reading support EAs and 2 lead teachers with $256,000. So, it must be a minuscule FTE. And is it impossible to apply all of could we donate $800,000 to high impact tutors? And would we know where they're being placed? Would they be placed at all elementary schools, or is there a parameter for that?
yeah, so I think these are limited term positions. They're not year round. I think they start in October and so that it's costed out for 29 weeks to meet 3 times a week with one student, serving multiple students, but that's, each student gets 3 times a week with the EA, to serve for 16 reading support. So that would be like 2 EAs in the 8 schools. You could increase that. It's just not a straight formula that you could say like 4 times that amount, then we could have 4 times that number of reading support EAs, because there's a formula they need for how many lead teachers there are and how many administrators over that. And we're with these cuts kind of unknown about what's happening in district office. I think that team was hesitant to say well, you can just apply all the money and make this program huge. So there could also be a motion that would say we want this to be a combination of high impact tutor EAs and EAs in classrooms. That would give the ability to apply, based on where there is students who have the most students who need support with benchmarks, and then also supporting with other needs like high class sizes or other things. I don't think that we're going as a committee I don't think it'd be appropriate for us to be in the details of deciding which schools and how exactly that gets portioned out. But what we can say is what we prioritize and why, and present that to the board. So Sachin has his hand up, and then Trina.
I just wanted to note that the Ignite reading online is at about 1,300 per student, a little bit more than that. And if you're just serving 192 students, the physical EAs in the classrooms are at about 1,200 per student. Or no, it's the other way around. 1,300 per student for people in class and 1,200 for people online. And if you get to the point where you're serving up more than like 213 students with the EAs at that price, then it's about the same or even better. So we could theoretically like just take that amount of money and put it, the 360, put it into that, or put it into physical, like EAs in classrooms instead of high impact tutoring. And you'd probably getting pretty similar efficiency, like dollar per student educated rate, you know.
Cool. I think that Ignite is was used in Irvington School this year, and this is that both the in-person EAs and the virtual are in that win block, the what I need. So that's the time in the school day when the student gets like focused attention, and when you have one teacher and they can only give so much individual attention to students. So this is a support for that. That way
Yeah,
that the district's trying to improve learning. So.
and it's able to get into schools where they're not necessarily getting all the extra teachers that can like fill the roles, right? Like the Ignite would be going to presumably kids across the district as opposed to just the 8 schools.
Okay, I think Trina is next, and maybe she's gonna step in here.
Yeah. I am just thinking about what I think, how I think we will get more of the bang of our buck. And I really, really support us as a group committee putting those teachers in the school. And just listening to what everyone said, I would recommend using at least 80% of the fund for putting teachers in school. My recommendation would be to use 150 roughly of the million for fundraising, and then the 850 million, roughly, these are rough numbers, to go towards actual EAs in schools. And I would say 400 million to the reading EAs and 450 to just EAs in the classroom. That would be my recommendation for the committee. I think the other things are great, but I think that we have such a small amount of funding this year, and I think it says a lot for us to say, let's make sure that we are putting the money into putting those faculty in the schools. The second part of that is I absolutely hear the endowment piece. And from what I remember, they were having a conversation, and we couldn't use these funds for this year for the endowment. We have to let the parents know ahead of time. So any fundraising that we do from today forward, we can include an endowment as part of next year. And so that could be something that we could think about. That could be something that we could plan for the next set of funding, to maybe set that aside. But as Robin said, a lot of us will be on the committee again next year, so we can just make sure that we are restating and focusing on those things that we found important this year. But for this year, those are my recommendations. At least 80% going to EAs in the classroom, or those reading specific EAs.
I second that motion.
Sorry, I was on mute. Trina, did you mean to propose that as a motion, or?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just trying to be funny. I know it wasn't.
Oh, okay. I mean, it happens that way, you know.
I was gonna propose it as a motion. So
Oh,
I thought it was serious, and I think it should be, in terms of solidifying our thinking. That, I move that we adopt 150,000 for fundraising, 400 for reading EAs, and 450 for EAs, subject to our decision on how those months, like on a recommendation for future allocations, like among the school. So 400 for reading should go to kids who are on the edge in reading, can almost get there. EAs should go to the highest classroom or maybe the highest need classroom. We can discuss, just that we discuss those kinds of things. But the motion is 150 fundraising, 400 reading EAs, 450 general EAs, subject to just a later decision on priority within those person funds. Anyone want to second?
I just want to clarify that I think we can put in our recommendation like what our values are and how we prioritize, but that when Kristen Johnson presented the model for EAs, she was recommending that those be the add-ons that happen in the fall based on balancing. And so that takes into account both the equity and class sizes that might go over the maximums based on when students actually land in chairs, because so that we would not be as a parent committee in the details of deciding which schools, but we could say like, you know, why we're putting forth this proposal and what we want to be prioritized. So Sun and Suzanne have their hands up, and then I think maybe we should do a going around it with having everyone say 2 cents and then a vote. And it looks like Audrey was able to join us too. So welcome. Sun?
Yeah, so when I'm looking at Kristen's presentation about the EAs, so if we were to allocate 450,000 towards EAs, you know, with the, you know, I think one of the concerns was, well, the average cost per year is going to be 88,000 this upcoming year with a 6% increase every year going forward. So with 450,000, that would essentially just mean 5.875 FTE EAs that we could bring on. And I think I remember hearing one of the concerns is we don't want to bring on an EA just for 1 year. So then if we were, you know, and if I heard you correctly, Robin, fundraising rates right now, we'd be lucky to hit $1 million for next year. You know, I agree that we would love to have more educators in the classrooms, but you know, if we look at it, it seems like it would be a tough call. Where do these 5 EAs go? And it doesn't seem like it's that significant when you consider how many schools we do have. The other question I just had real quick is when I was looking at the food pantry slide, it seems like, you know, is there just a one-time cost to set up the pantries and then it would be less to support them in a supplemental way? Because if so, then it seems like, you know, this is just an upfront investment, and then it wouldn't be 200,000 a year potentially to continue to support the food pantries. But the two options, they're worded a little bit differently. One mentions it would be 20,000 to set up, and the other one mentioned 15,000 as supplemental. So I wasn't sure, you know, how that breaks down.
Yes. I think that it was a combination of both. So some schools need infrastructure. So some of the funding was for that. And then there was like an amount of money per school that they could have to purchase food. I know a lot of schools have some well-established partnerships already where they're getting a lot of food in, and they were saying they might not need as much. And then also our Sun community schools, they were some of them have pantries, and we were concerned about reductions there, but there's also some advocacy happening at the county and city level to maintain Sun. So there's just a lot of unknowns. I don't think we can pin it down exactly. There was 50,000 that was also meant for cooked meals for homeless families. So I think that if there was some amount that somebody wanted to put forth towards that, part of that was to be responsive to that these funds would have gone to our most underserved in the PPS Parent Fund model. So that would serve and that program is serving the Title I schools. And the food was the number one thing that the parents identified in the needs assessment of what they need support with to ensure their students' readiness to learn and attendance. So Suzanne and then Audrey.
Yeah, I just don't want to miss an amazing opportunity we have here as the first PAC for this new district-wide foundation, and just lean in on EAs, because especially if we are going to have just one vote that's going to move forward for next year's recommendation, because yeah, and next year we could propose that next year the fundraising goal is to put 0.5 EAs in every classroom and give donors a dollar amount that we need to reach to hit that goal. But this year we only have $1 million. And I think that if the more buckets we can put that money into and display, just as a matter of example, because let's keep in mind this $1 million was supposed to go to traditionally schools that aren't able to fundraise, right? And I think that if we did suggest to PPS that it all go to EAs, the PPS would probably send those EAs not to schools that have the highest class sizes necessarily, but the schools that meet the traditional demographics and exceed class sizes, or the historically underserved demographics. But we could say, look, we have a need for food pantries in our district, because some kids, that's the only place they eat. We have a need for early learning literacy. And yes, it's going to be a small amount of money that we're allocating, but this is something that our community needs. And we also have a need for IXL. I mean, kids are struggling in algebra. I don't want to pigeonhole this vote to be what are the traditionally wealthy, foundations? What are the traditional foundations going to get behind? Because that is not the point of a district-wide foundation. The point of a district-wide foundation is to bring all school communities in, and so you could have a restaurant night across the district. And everybody can go to the restaurant night, and who knows how much money that would raise for the district if it was a citywide restaurant night. So I just want to throw that out there and keep scenario A, or a variation of scenario A, in the mix, where there's a little bit of money going to a lot of places, and we can provide an explanation of why we did that and a separate recommendation for future fundraising.
Robin, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Suzanne, I was going to say, do you have that formulated to the point where you would want to put that in as a motion? Because that could give us all something to vote on two different scenarios, and then do, hear from everyone on the two different scenarios and then do a vote.
Well, I know I haven't done the math.
Okay, why don't you work on that and we'll hear
Okay.
from Audrey, okay? All right, Audrey?
Sorry, I just got back. I just had a question about the different scenarios. It looks the way that scenarios A is broken down, just seems a lot more dispersed with like I'm just thinking about like high impact tutoring. Like it's got the food pantry, it's got EAs. It doesn't have EAs, is that right? 16 reading support EAs in addition to the high impact tutoring? Or is
No,
that
those are the high impact tutoring EAs.
those are the
they're
high impact tutoring EAs? Okay.
the reading, yeah, support EAs.
But the food pantry is built into this option where it's not like built into the EA option or the third option. I'm just curious why this one's structured in a way that all of that's built in as opposed to it being like an optional thing for an add-on to any option as opposed, do you understand my question?
Yeah, I think that you could, the really the only reason is because there was more room in this budget, of what the Learning Acceleration proposed.
Could you do, I mean, in theory, you could do more
Yeah.
EAs as opposed to breaking out. Like that, I guess that's where like if the other one went all towards the EAs, if this one we did more towards the high impact tutoring, right? I mean, that money fluctuates either way, no matter which scenario. Because I know that, I mean, my guess isn't 16 isn't the cap on how many we want overall of reading support, high impact tutoring. Like you say that like there was more flexibility in this budget, but I don't understand why in one option of like EAs, that was the entire budget where this one was capped at 16.
Yeah, I think that it was up to them to put together their proposal. I shared with them the feedback that there was support for Ignite among several of the committee members and IXL, but that Paloma was the one that was really rejected. So they put this together based on like being able to serve at these critical levels of K3, 5th grade, so that you're prepared to enter middle school, and high school, the 9th and 10th grade, so that you can succeed in algebra because of the outcome towards graduation. That's their ideal model of like having.
So this budget was presented by them. That's there's that.
Yeah, and because there was more room, I added in the food pantries at the 200,000. We could come back and we could reduce that to be like, well, we only want this amount to help with startup, and we will support food pantries because it's important. And because there's other ways you can do food drives. It's like elevating the issue, and then like maybe we can get district-wide support for those. So this scenario is not set in stone as this is the way it has to go down. It was just to add up to the 1,030,000.
Okay, and I'm curious, and again, I mean, just to reiterate or iterate what regarding the food pantries, what we kind of discussed last week, and I don't know what I missed at the beginning of this meeting, is like I don't think that there was anybody on this committee that doesn't want to fund those food pantries, but because we have such a limited amount of money within our budget, and that there are other opportunities for that funding because it's a specific niche that we might not be the best pocketbook to be pulling from. So that I guess that's where my question lies in that is like is this the correct place to fund that? Not, of course, not that it's we all know how critical it is.
I'm not sure if you heard my suggestion, Audrey. I think it was right before you got on.
I missed it, Trina. Sorry. Would you go ahead
No
and
worries,
share
no
that?
worries. So my suggestion was that I said a lot, but mostly I said because a lot of us will be here next year. We have 2 terms. So thinking of a scenario that coincides with this year, there, and next year, we can make suggestions and recommendations, but we really just have $1 million to work with for this year. So my recommendation was that we allocate 150 to fundraising and use at least 80% for actual teachers in school. And so my suggestion was using 400 for the reading EAs and using 450 for just the regular in-school EAs. And I know it's not going to put a whole bunch of EAs in the school, and I just think we don't have the budget for that, no matter what. But I think that it's important that as a group we say our priority is putting teaching professionals in school, and with hopefully what we can do for next year is we can set a goal and say we need 4.5 million for next year, and then we can do, you know, food pantries, and we can do IXL and all those things. But for this year, I feel like we should be conservative and say we recognize as a group our job is for staffing. It's, you know, it's in our name, and so that's kind of where my suggestions coming in. Suzanne had a little bit more. She wants to diversify the funds a little bit more than I am thinking about, and I think she's gonna come back with some numbers. But that was my thought.
Yeah, Trina, I thank you for sharing that. Sorry, I missed that initially. I agree. I mean, there's just so few funds that we can use to get teachers in the classrooms, because of how the funding and donations, you know, and other money can potentially work. And so I feel like it is a rare opportunity where we have to be able to support teachers or assistants in the faces in the classrooms.
I did do a calculation, but listening to Trina and Audrey, I don't disagree with you. I think I think the adults in the room is probably the most important thing. So my mind could be changed on that. But I have a question. How does everyone feel about, like, why not spend all the money towards high impact tutors versus why do we feel so compelled to get 4 EAs out of, you know, 400,000 or 450, whatever? I'm not quite sure. I think we get more bang for our buck with the high impact tutors.
Robin, it seemed like they couldn't, I just assumed they couldn't use that much money, that if they only asked for 250, that if we gave them $1 million, they wouldn't be able to use it all, but maybe that's wrong.
I think what I was trying to explain is I think they were being conservative in what they can support internally now. So it's not a straight formula of just adding EAs. You need to add the lead teachers and an administrator over the program. So but I do think that they could spend the money, like everyone can spend the money if that was what the determination was. I was just saying, I don't think we could take the 256 and just multiply it times 4 and then say we'd have served that 4 times that number of students. It wouldn't be a straight formula. There would have to be, you know, some figuring out of the oversight and implementation of that. It could also be partners or other models that they might look at to implement that way. If we could say we want to go beyond K3, because the early literacy money that is funding the reading support EAs in 26 schools is for K3. You could have the in-person model for 5th grade. So these would be things that we would recommend. I don't think we would necessarily say like this amount for fifth grade. Like I would say, we want to give you all of it and serve as many grade levels as you can, as many schools as you can, like where the highest need students are. Highest need in advancing to their benchmark. Dan, did you have your hand up?
I think people had their hands up before me, but
Oh, sorry.
I guess maybe I'm ignorant to what you were just asking about, like the difference between the reading support EAs and regular EAs. So basically, a regular EA would be like full time every day there supporting a teacher in a classroom, versus these reading support EAs come in for like a couple of hours at a certain time of day, certain number of days a week. Is that sort of the concept of the difference between the two?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, a mixture, I guess, does sound cool. All right.
Audrey?
I was just going to respond and say, that I like that proposal, Suzanne, because I think that, it's the high impact tutoring. This is the first year it's even been in our schools, correct? Or is that right?
At such a large scale, yeah.
At such a large scale. And I think if we could give them a boost, because I think that the program that they have going is so strong. And if, the more we could support that up front, because I do think as far as an equitability model, that we probably get to access more children through that than we would through more traditional EA staff members. And I think more school districts get to use it at that point. And I love the idea of, what if we supported growing that number that they have now, and then maybe they add like the fourth grade, so it's not like a huge shift in the system. And I don't know what that looks like for them, but instead of it being like a totally different program, like what if it just, we looked at like expanding it every year so we could see, I don't know, I guess in my mind, like support more what is there currently, and then have a slight shift in what their model looks like so that they could potentially handle adding more grades.
Mhm. Trina, do you want to do something where we have everyone go around for 1 minute and just kind of say where they're at, and then return to the motions for
Yes, yeah. Let's go ahead and do that. And I just want to make sure I just call back and just want to make sure I'm married or everybody's hearing the same thing. The suggestion that I put forward was the breakdown in the three parts: the EAs, the high impact tutors, and the fundraising. And hearing Audrey and Suzanne talk about the high impact reading tutors just swayed me. You guys are swaying me a little bit. I do believe in getting more bang for your buck, and I also believe that the more we can get people excited about what we can do with the high impact tutors, and say, imagine what we could do if we also had EAs. And so that could be like a ramp up for getting more and more support. And so I think that, these are my ideas. So I'm starting, obviously. And I would be, I would be curious to hear what everybody else felt after all of that. I know Sun Lee had a little bit more that he wanted to diversify the money with, and so I'd be interested to hear about that. But I think I've been swayed about the high impact tutor getting the most bang for our buck, maybe even potentially having me able to serve more grades just because we were able to give them more money than they expected. So that's where I'm leaning now. Anybody else want to go? And I can't see. I'm sorry, I can't see you folks. So someone else is gonna have to do the popcorn for me.
I can go first. This is Sun. Trina, since you can't see. Um, I lean towards scenario A. You know, when I look at the worksheet that was attached, and you know, the increases at the 5th grade level, the K through 3 level, and then the 9th and 10th grade students, you know, it impacts, you know, every area of the PPS school district. And it seems like, you know, it's leaning towards what the community wanted was, you know, focusing on education. It's not a person in the room, but there is still with the tutors a, you know, kind of an individualized tutoring session. And it seems like it does improve reading rates, math rates, which will improve graduation rates. And then I think as a community, I think it's important that we fund the food pantries as well, because, you know, we want to be a all-inclusive community. And then the only thing I would potentially change is, you know, with the fundraising, and I understand we can't put this money towards the endowment, but maybe in the future ones we could. But if, you know, do we need 143,000 to fundraise for next year? Could we get away with 75,000 when we put the rest of it towards either the reading support EAs to serve more students or to the Ignite Reading Virtual? So instead of 300, maybe we can have 400 kids there. So I would lean towards scenario A of the 3 proposals.
I can go next if you need somebody. I was gonna say I support 150 for fundraising, and then the remainder for any distribution of humans in the room that others agree on. That can be reading support, high impact tutoring, EAs, whatever mix we come up with. So that would be kind of my ideal breakdown.
Okay. Dan?
I think I would mostly echo that. Like, I liked what Trina was saying, and that I guess the mix for me of how much is regular EAs versus reading support EAs wouldn't be super important, as if there's some kind of representation of both. I think there needs to be at least some fundraising so that we can actually sort of throw these events to try to get people excited about doing this. But I'm less excited about the IXL and virtual things as regular people for staffing. So that's where I would go. I think I could echo that same idea, that really focusing on people in the room with some fundraising is, I think, what would draw people in the most.
Thanks. Sushin?
I support pretty much any proposal that has high impact tutoring, because I think that's big. I like scenario A because I think that just covering that diverse range of stuff is important, especially if we're trying to spend money across the whole district, not just focusing all our eggs into one basket feels like a good idea. But Trina's proposal or Suzanne's proposal of like put it mostly into high impact tutoring and have some left for fundraising seems also pretty solid. So I'd vote for either of those really.
Thanks. Suzanne?
Okay, so if you guys can help me out with math, I would propose we do 100,000 for fundraising, 200,000 for food pantries, 70,000 for the math, so we get math into it, and it's not just reading, and then the remaining, whatever that is. So 1 million minus
630,000
into high impact tutoring.
Yeah, I think it should be 630,000. If you're spending 370,000, 1,000, 2,000, yeah, I think.
660,000.
Yeah.
And that whatever's left over from the fundraising seed money goes into starting an endowment annually.
And you said high impact tutoring EAs, not regular EAs, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm opposed to funding regular EAs, and I think this is the best time for me to say why. I think that that's not the role of a foundation. I think that EAs are too core to a classroom, and that it should be the message of the PAC and the district-wide foundation that we're focused on things like food pantries, high impact tutoring, a special technology that might improve algebraic math results in the high school level, because we could get potentially with $4 million, 0.5 EAs in every classroom, but is that going to be enough to encourage fundraising going forward? And is that the role of private funds in our district to fund core teachers? That's just where I stand on it. I think the high impact reading tutors seems like a very specialized program that's focused on the kids who need the help the most, and I can fully support that.
Suzanne, what
Yeah,
was the
could I ask a-
strategy for? Oh, I just wanted to clarify what the proposal, 100 fundraising, 200 food pantries, and then it was 70 for what?
The IXL, just so that we get some math in there,
Got it.
because our
Okay.
math
And I think-
scores are worse than our reading scores
Got it.
across the board.
And then just for clarification, Suzanne, since essentially there's two high impact tutoring. There's the ones for the 5th grade and then ones for the K through 3. So then the rest of the money would go to both programs.
Well, I think we would leave it up to, it would initially go to the 3rd grade, what they've proposed. And then if we're building up and they feel like they can expand into 5th grade, let's let PPS do that. But I think the decision should always be up to PPS, how that allocation plays out based on need.
But not the Ignite program, right? Not
Yes,
the
not the virtual, correct.
Okay. Annika, did you want to share your thoughts?
I'm on board with either scenario A or Suzanne's. I think if we want to encourage the community to donate, this, especially scenario A, would show the most widespread impact as opposed to just getting 11 EAs spread somewhere, which may see no impact in parents or like children's lives in the classrooms. So I think scenario A is the best for having impact and encouraging the community to be on board with donating.
Thanks. Audrey?
I'm back on. Sorry, my internet was spotty. I think, I like Suzanne's proposal. Similarly, though, I would pull out the food pantry, and again, not that I don't support it, but just because this is such a distinct opportunity to have bases in the classroom, teachers in the classroom, and we know, and again, I think the food pantry can come up with other places to get that money. So I would like to see maybe we do a separate vote on that, because I'm feeling like I'm hearing it's split. So as far as that option goes, maybe but I would concur with Isla and David. I think humans in the classroom is the most important thing. I like Suzanne's nod to the math. I think it's important that we also support that. And I would concur with her about we don't have to specifically tell them which classrooms they're going to go, what grade levels or schools are going to go into. They can kind of figure out that matrix because they have a better understanding of it than we probably do. But I also agreed with the funding and trying to keep this something that continues to progress.
I think Audrey was the last person, and I think she was suggesting maybe we do a raise of hands on who supports using some of this funding for food pantries, so we can decide whether that's part of a final motion or not. Is that what you were suggesting? Okay. Would people feel comfortable doing a raise of hands if you to let us know if you support including funding for food pantries out of this allocation.
And you have to physically raise your hand because it doesn't, I don't know if this is showing
Yeah,
on the
it's sort of like
recording or.
flashed. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4. Dan, Session, and Sun. Is that right? Okay. And
Did you get Annika too?
let's do a raise of hands of who does not think that we should use this money for food pantries. Just to verify. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then it seems like everybody agrees of putting some amount aside for fundraising, but maybe there's some differing opinions on the level. And then we have the IXL. Maybe we should do a vote of who supports including the IXL math skills for 9th and 10th grade out of this money. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
Did you get my hand? Sorry, my video had a delay on it.
Oh, okay.
I think there were 6, Robin.
6. Okay.
That's not the virtual, right? That's the high school math. Math is not
Right.
virtual.
Right. Yeah, it's a skills training. It's what a lot of tutors actually use when they work with students. Trina, did you have something?
No, sorry. My hand was
Oh,
up
you were
just a little bit
raising.
too long. Yeah.
Okay. So I think what I'm hearing is there's the most support for doing high impact EAs, not regular EAs, now that we've had a fuller discussion. Could we have a raise of hands on that question? Who thinks that all of our EA dollars should be focused on high impact tutors? Okay. So Dan, you're an outlier on this one. Are you thinking you like the combination still of, is that why?
I guess I liked the idea of it being a model for the future, that people would think that by donating to this and hopefully we increase our amounts each year, that they would also be getting like real full-time people, not just a hired company that comes in for a certain number of hours.
I see. Okay. And another way to do that could also be in the statement in terms of future fundraising of, we also support adding EAs to classroom, but we did not have sufficient funds. If we could raise 4 million, then we would suggest a splitting or something. That could be another way of addressing that.
That makes sense.
Okay. I wonder how what people think maybe of the idea of putting a smaller amount towards the food pantry, so that it would be just the startup funds for schools that don't have that now.
What would that be?
I mean, I think that we could determine what we want it to be. I was kind of wondering about doing 100,000 to food and and 100,000 towards fundraising, and then you'd have the 70,000 for IXL, and then the rest could be towards tutoring.
So just decreasing the food pantry by 100,000, and that 100 would be applied to the tutoring amount.
Mhm.
Is that because you're afraid that there's not enough in the tutoring amount to cover the administrative aspect, or?
Yeah, I mean, if we can drop it completely too. It was just a very like close vote on that.
Oh, it's like a compromise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Let's vote on that.
Let me do the math. Does anyone else want to say anything while I just add this up?
I think that sounds like a fair compromise. I feel like it's a nod and shows our support of the food pantry, which again, we all know the importance of food. And I support that. And then having raised money in the past for this situation, I just know how the dollars that go towards the individuals in front of the children, how important that is and how difficult it is to raise those dollars specifically. So I like being able to do that a little more and being able to support that food bank.
Deborah, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, if we drop the food pantry down to 100,000 for the 20 schools, that would be about 5,000. Well, that would be 5,000 each. And looking at their proposal, they're trying to help 7,000 students with their families, and it just, I mean, honestly, that's it doesn't seem that much. So I would be against dropping it to 100,000. I mean, even at 200,000, it's not that much support. But I wouldn't block if other people went this way.
Yeah, it was the nuance is that we know that there are some schools that don't have any infrastructure for food pantries, and we have others that have well established or already ongoing food pantries that may not need the resources out of those 20. But I hear you. I mean, it does feel like a hard compromise.
Do we know if the company that provides the high impact tutoring, are they a local company or a national company?
So the model of the reading support EAs is us hiring here. I mean, that's under the district. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I just asked because that, like with the tech companies, that's not money going back into our economy. And the reading EAs, money going back into the Portland economy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the other major partner is Reading Results, which is a nonprofit, and they hire and supervise the tutors local.
Great.
All right, so I feel like I might have muddied the waters with the food pantry. So I'm going to turn it over to Trina to put together what you think the motion should be. Got a baby on her lap, I think.
I do have a baby on my lap. Sorry, you guys. I got a visitor in the middle of this. He's being very he's not being agreeable.
Oh,
I don't know if you guys can see him.
yeah.
But
Yes, we can.
definitely
He's darling.
I'm fighting for my life here now. But I think that the discussion around the food pantries is important. But I don't want it to be the point that stops us from making the decision, if that makes sense. I I think that for the most part we are in agreement. I think, yeah, I don't want it to be the issue that keeps us from moving forward, because I feel like as a group we were ready to move forward. I wouldn't mind. It is 7:01 right now. And I'm trying to decide, does it make sense to do one more vote on the food pantry? Um, it, so it sounds like it's either going to be one or two scenarios, and I'm sorry if I've gotten this wrong. It's either going to be $100 for fundraising, $100 for the food pantry, 70,000 for the IXL, and the remaining for the high impact in-school tutors. The second proposal would be the $100, 100,000 for the fundraising, 200 for food pantries, 70 for IXL, and then the remainder of that would be for the high impact tutors in the school. So our decision really is, do we want $100,000 to go towards food pantries, or do we think that money is better spent with the high impact tutors? I don't know if that's what we should vote on. It's just one more quick vote. Either voting for high impact tutors, or you're voting for a food pantry. Everything else has kind of been settled, and so hopefully we don't get a tie with this last vote, and we can move on with our night. But I feel like whatever the majority is, I feel like we should just go with that and move forward.
Trina, can I just, I
Go
thought we
ahead,
were
sorry.
at, if, that's okay, sorry to interrupt. I just thought we were maybe gonna decide between 100,000 and 200,000 for the food bank. And
Yes.
then,
Isn't that what she
okay.
said?
I just wanted to I just wanted to be clear that I wasn't sure on
Yeah.
that final wrap up.
So if we did,
And your baby is adorable.
Thank you.
if we did 200,000 for food pantry, 100 for fundraising, and 70 for IXL, that leaves 660,000 for high impact tutoring. And if we did 100,000 for the food pantry and the other items stay the same, it's 760,000 for the high impact tutoring. So that's the difference.
Yeah.
And I know
And so
we're
to kind of go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, I know we're about to vote, but just to clarify, since it sounds like this is the only choice left, is 100 or 200 for food pantry. The difference exactly for that is basically that the 100 would only provide a startup support for some of the schools that don't have it already, versus 200 would then allow more schools to have it or be able to help sustain ones that do have it already. Like, what would that other extra 100,000 do? I know it's a quick
It would
version
most
since we're about
like-
to vote, but
Yeah, I think it would most likely then be for purchasing food. It would be beyond just the startup cost.
And as far as their fundraising goes, like, do they have limits as far as how they're able to approach different potential donors? Like this fund does, or can they kind of go to anyone to get funding? Like, what is their model as far as fundraising goes?
Yes, there's a hunger relief grant with the Portland Children's Levy, and the proposal from PPS was not recommended for funding. So that's not final yet. It's still going in front of city council and so on. But
The food pantries that are connected to Sun Schools work really closely with the Oregon Food Bank. And they've just had a large cut to their funding because of the USAID. So it basically is whatever dollars are contributed. They don't do fundraising themselves unless they're connected to a nonprofit. Say if it's IRCO as the Sun School provider, then they might do the fundraising themselves. But the Sun program and for food banks does not do their own fundraising just for that, but they do work closely to leverage all the food and donations they can from the food bank.
it's just a tough environment out there with all the federal grants disappearing, and philanthropy is only going to do so much. So, Trina, I'm sorry, I keep relying on you. I wasn't sure if you were wanting to do a vote on.
Yes. And I think it's just very simple. Just do a vote for if you think that we should do $200 for the food banks, then we'll do the allocations for that. We don't have to vote the other way. So whoever thinks that we should use 200,000 of the $1 million towards food banks. Let's do one more vote, and then we will put a motion on our final decision.
Okay, so if you support 200,000 going towards food pantries, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have a split vote. No, I think that's a more majority if we're not including staff, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which still puts 2/3 to the high impact tutor. So I think we're still doing what we're trying to do,
It sounds great.
Okay, so does somebody want to Trina, do you want to express the
Yes.
motion one more time then?
So I motion that we spend that we allocate the funding 100K going towards future fundraising, 200K going towards food pantries, 70K going to the IXL math tutoring program, and the remaining balance of 600 or so odd $1,000 going towards high impact tutors. Does anyone second my motion?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Everybody's hand is raised, Trina.
Okay, great. Thank you guys. I'm glad we were able to reach a conclusion. This is great. I appreciate every one of you and your ideas. You guys are also thoughtful. This was not an easy process. And we had a lot to consider. We had a lot of folks talking at us for a very short time. And so I'm just very proud of the insight and what we were able to decide.
Thank you, Trina.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for all your contributions and all the time you've dedicated to this. I'm going to be putting the information together. I have to submit it tomorrow for the board packet, and Trina will be presenting it at the April 8th board meeting to the board. Let me know if you plan to attend the board meeting, and I'll see if we can save chairs on the front row for you. Love to have you there, and I'll find out once I see the agenda what time we're on, because those meetings can go quite long. I'm not sure. They start at 6, but sometimes they go till. Hopefully, we're early on the agenda. I'm not sure. Suzanne, did you have a question?
Yeah, can members of the PAC submit public comment prior to it being given to the board? I think public comments before they vote on things, right?
Mhm.
So if
Yeah,
we
you
want to
should-
just talk about like what happened, or I don't know.
Mhm.
I just feel like we there's so much more to this, and I think it would be great if we could all be there and show unity and excitement about, and maybe plan some public comment about fundraising for next year and suggestions.
Yes, and I think that's great, and it also can continue. It doesn't all have to happen on the 8th, but I think having as many of you there, and I'll send you the link to sign up for public comment. If you're not used to navigating our board page, it can be a little confusing. And
Well, and if people want to submit their draft comments or submit their comments to us, we can get them entered too, because sometimes it's confusing to go through. If that's okay.
While we're talking about the board, do you guys know where they meet? Because I don't actually know where board meetings are held. So I'm not sure if I'd be able to make it based on the time on the agenda, because I do need to go to sleep at a normal time most days, especially on a school day like
Yeah.
Tuesday.
It's at the 501 North Dixon office, the district office, that we have that boardroom in there. It's also live streamed and virtual. You can also do public comment virtually too, if you sign up to give public comment. You can also submit written public comment. Because I have such a short timeline to put in the presentation for tomorrow, I don't think I could include all of your comments in the report that has to go to the board. But so the public comment thing is a good option for that. But I will try to represent this discussion and Trino can speak to it too, obviously.
And it's just the first reading by the board, so there's a whole nother month that people can submit comment.
Mhm.
And yeah.
Yeah, and although, it would be the actual vote from the board might ask questions or say comments, but then they'll do another vote in May. Yeah. So. All right.
Thank you, Robin.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thanks all of you for hanging in there and making these tough choices and being so engaged and interested. I appreciate you all. You're fantastic.
Trina, did you have your hand up? Did you want to say something?
No. I put my hand up and I think the baby distracted me and it never went back down.
Oh, that's okay. All right, we'll just close the meeting then at 7:15.
Yes, let's close the meeting at 7:15. You guys all have a good night. Great work. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you and bye.